Great, thank you. Good evening. Welcome to the November 9th, 2023 Cotuit Fire District Prudential Committee meeting. Want to call first, is anyone recording the meeting? And if so, please raise your hand. Seeing none. Do a roll call. Seth Burdick?
Present.
Present. Mark Lynch?
Present.
Ray Perone?
He's here, but he's muted.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm here. Sorry about that.
Thanks. Charlie Eager? I didn't see him. And Fran Parks. I'm going to ask Mark to do the Pledge of Allegiance for the entire group. We'll just have Mark do it. Thank you, Mark.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I'd just like to take a minute to thank the volunteers of the school committee that worked on this project on the school for several years. Jackie Barton, Jim Danhauser, Tom Hoppenstadt, Adam Zais, Ron Mycock, Ray Perone, Mark Lynch, DJ McKinnon, and myself. I want to point out Mark Lynch, Jim Danhauser, and Jackie Barton were our negotiating team with the town, and they did a stellar job. And now I will, and also I want to thank Mark Boudreau, our attorney, who also worked very, very hard to get this process going. Okay, Mark, I'm gonna turn it over to you.
Okay. Lisa, can you put up my PowerPoint? Okay, thank you. And good evening. We have a nice crowd, 60 participants. We're delighted to see that. We're anxious to hear what everyone has to say. I'm going to try to be brief. Can you go to the next slide? So to briefly remind everybody, this is the property in question, and that which is outlined in green is the property that we are acquiring. Just to be clear, the tennis courts and the baseball diamond will remain with the town of Barnstable. We will get this L-shaped property that includes 8 plus or minus acres and what's designated there as the White Pine Forest, plus of course the school building itself. You can go to the next slide. No, not that one. It should say good news at the top. There we go. Good news. Finally, the deed has been recorded. That which we told you guys months ago was soon to happen has finally happened. We own the property and the building, and we are now, as of yesterday, actually, is when the deed was recorded, responsible for the insurance, the maintenance, the utilities relating to the property, and also importantly, and the reason for this call, the decision as to how to utilize the property is ours to make, and that's why we're having these calls. You can go to the next slide. And the one after that, there we go. So at our last meeting, there was some confusion, a lot of confusion, frankly, about what the decision-making process is with regard to what we're going to do with the school property. So I thought I'd spend just a few minutes to kind of run through that process. I know many of you are very familiar with the Prudential Committee and what it does and how it operates, and you're always there at the annual meetings, but others may not be. So the decision as to what we're going to do with the school is ultimately going to be made by the Cotuit Fire District voters. So what does that mean? So the Prudential Committee, which consists of Fran Parks and Seth Burdick and myself, is the finance and governing arm of the Cotuit Fire District. We are a 3-person committee elected by village voters. Each of us is up for election each year. That is one after another sequentially. And we are the financial end of the operation. There, of course, is the 3-person fire and the 3-person water committee as well. So after we get input on this project, the Prudential Committee, the 3 of us, will recommend a course of action. That's italicized because I want to emphasize that we do not dictate what happens. For those of you who have come to our annual meetings, you know that we have warrants that we draft that relate to the disbursement of funds. And they can be from small amounts to very large amounts, you know, kind of be it resolved that we will spend $2.7 million for the fire department in the next fiscal year. And then that is broken down. And then that individual warrant is voted on by the voters attending the district meeting. So that is what we do. We propose expenditures of funds by warrant. And that is what we will do with the school project, the school property project. There will be a warrant that is voted on by the voters at a special district meeting. So for those of you interested in kind of some more of the guts, you can look at Article 2 of the Cotuit Fire District bylaws, which are on our Prudential Committee website, the Cotuit Fire District website, with the Prudential Committee being a subset there. So after we hear from the voters, a special meeting would be called by the Prudential Committee to vote on a proposed warrant or warrants. Importantly, articles can also be inserted into a warrant ahead of a special meeting by petition of 50 registered voters. So at some point we will, and tonight actually, we are going to say what our tentative, very tentative thoughts are about what to do with the property. But if voters are not happy with our proposal, they can write their own. And also proposed warrants can be amended within reason as decided by the moderator at the meeting. So essentially they can be tweaked. So ultimately that will be the Cotuit Fire District voters who decide this. Next slide, please. So what are the possible uses? I mean, in my view, and I think the Prudential Committee's view, the binary choices are either to demolish the building, and there are multiple possible alternatives after that. We could just let it grow back to nature. We could do plantings. We could have gardens there, subject to water supply issues. It could possibly be the site of a future firehouse, more on that later. Or we could rehab all or part of the building, and that is a daunting financial task, somewhere in the range of 4 to 6 million approximately, and I'll get into that in a little bit later. Some of the suggestions are that, you know, the building could be rehabbed and turned into Cotuit Fire District offices. At this point, there does not appear to be any enthusiasm on behalf of the Prudential, the Fire, or the Water Committee for that use. The Water District has its own building. The Prudential Committee, of course, has Freedom Hall, and our treasurer and assistant treasurer work from home, which seems to work well. There is also members of the community who think that the building could potentially be used for a community center, and have identified a number of possible uses for such a building. You can go to the next slide. So currently, tentative, italics there. We want to listen. We want to hear what people have to say. But we kind of want to give you a preview of what we're thinking about and why, and get some response to that to see if we're on the right track, or if we're not not tracking what people are thinking. Our current tentative view is that the building should be demolished, and to protect the water supply, the land returned to nature. We view, or I certainly view, the rehab costs as prohibitive. As I mentioned, there's a lack of interest for the Cotuit Fire District offices in the current building. It's the best protection for the water supply, and it does add protected land to the village center. I mentioned the possibility of a firehouse site. I just want to be clear. Some people have indicated that in their view, this was the fire department wants this to build a firehouse there. That was not the genesis of the attempt to get this intergovernmental transfer. And as I understand it, the fire department doesn't have any interest in the reuse of the building in its current state. Whether or not there is a new firehouse would be approved by the district voters in the manner I just mentioned, in a completely separate vote. And again, I will let the fire department speak for themselves, but my understanding is the last thing they were looking at was the possibility of expanding the site at High Street. So next slide. So as I mentioned, the community center has been raised, that possibility. That we believe would require some kind of long-term lease to a third party. Some of you who were on our earlier calls have listened to the discussion about our enabling legislation, which is the Massachusetts Act back in, I want to say 1920 something, that created the Cotuit Fire District. And under that legislation, we are allowed to run a police department, a fire department, a water department, and to take care of sidewalks and streetlights. So if we try to expand that, we would potentially have to have another act of the Massachusetts legislature to expand our abilities, so to speak. So those of you who have been on these calls before have heard me refer to the Habib report. I should mention here that the Prudential Committee website has a number of materials on this topic. Key among them is the Habib report, which is the name of an architectural firm that did a very detailed analysis of the school building about 4 years ago, and determined what it would cost to bring it back into shape to operate as a school again. It is very detailed. It is very worthwhile. We recently asked for an update on that to include the cost of inflation over the 4 years since the report was written, and also include the replacement of the roof, which was not included in the early report. I just also want to point out that while these the uses that the community center has been proposed for, there are alternative venues in the village and other service providers that either already do or could do many of the items identified there, including the library, the Federated Church, which has a brand new commercial kitchen, for example, the Center for the Arts. In my view, the question is not, we have this building, what should we put in it? But what is important to the village, what services, and are they already being provided, or can they be provided at a lesser cost? Next slide. So what do we do from here? This meeting, for example, is prime. We want to hear from you. When we do, the Prudential Committee will ultimately draft a proposed warrant or warrants for the spending of certain money. And, depending on what we decide. And again, that is decide to recommend. Those of you who have been to Prudential Committee meetings know that we sometimes are voted down for our recommendations. And that is the voters' right, of course. Timing wise, special meeting late 2023, it's probably getting a little late for that, possibly early 24. I do think it's important to have a special meeting. Our annual meeting is jam-packed every year with items, and this certainly is an important item. And then the CFD voters will vote on the proposed warrant. So that's kind of the process. Now I just want to turn it over and start looking for questions on anything I've just presented. And from there, we'll go into to commentary on what people think we should be doing.
There are some chats that are already posted with.
Go ahead with the chats.
Can you read those to us?
Okay. I'm not sure what the first one is talking about. Check your own Zoom settings. So I'm not sure what's going on there. Hold on.
No, it was, somebody was having trouble hearing.
All right, well, I have a hand. Oh, sorry. Larry has raised his hand. Ask Larry to unmute. Larry?
Got it. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Great. Thank you. My name is Larry Moran. Seth and I are good friends. And I've lived in Cotuit now for about 4 or 5 years. And I've been on the Conservation Commission for Barnstable for a chunk of my lifetime. And I'm highly impressed by not only the way you've presented it, but the content, the tone, everything is very, very commendable. And the flexibility you're showing towards the citizens and each other is laudatory. That being said, I've got a couple of questions, and you probably have touched on them already, Mark. One is the water sources themselves, whether it's groundwater or some sort of, whether it's any public water is pumped into that property. That would be interesting to know. The second question deals with the septic age and condition. I presume since it was a school, there was a septic system there. And is that salvageable for any other use? The other factors deal with whether or not, I'm trying to write it, I'm interested in what the firehouse options might be. By that, I mean, you've got a firehouse up on High Street that is certainly in a cramped space, but the question is, does it serve your purposes now? And if so, do you envisage it being something you might want to do in the future? I'm going to stop there because I don't want to throw a string of questions at you that are going to confuse your answers, but hopefully that is something that you might be able to answer easily, and I look forward to hearing how you respond. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. With regard to the septic system, there is a septic system there. The leaching fields remain in the part of the property that's going to remain with the town. But we didn't test the septic, but we believe it to be functioning. And if memory serves, in the conservation restriction that we obtained, we retain the right to retire that in place if necessary. With regard to the fire department, firehouse, I should really defer to the fire department. As I mentioned in the Prudential Committee webpage, there is the fire department did a PowerPoint presentation about their their needs, and I would defer to them. As I say, as I understand it, they don't think the existing building could be retrofitted. They are inclined to investigate, and they are investigating, I believe, whether the High Street building could be expanded while it's still being used in operation. So other than that, I best defer to them.
Larry, I'll just say that the fire station is not meeting their needs and is woefully inadequate. So that's, why they're
Rick
looking into
Rick
improving.
Pisano has raised his hand to respond to that.
Hi, Rick.
Where Fran is.
Good,
Oh, here.
good evening, at Rick Pisano, excuse me, Fire Commissioner. I do have an exception to your presentation of the fire department's position. My point is not that there is strong sentiment to use the school building or some version of it for a new fire station. We do desperately need a new station. My concern is that if the building is torn down before a cost analysis is done, the district is deprived of the opportunity of comparing the potential cost of a renovation of the existing structure versus a huge renovation at the existing location on High Street versus any other plausible possibility, which I'm not aware of. If a decision is made to take the building down, the structure of the building, which needs work, absolutely, but has good bones. The structure modification, I believe, could potentially be significantly more cost effective for the district. I could be very wrong in that, but it seems irresponsible to tear the building down without assessing the potential for very significant savings to the district and meeting the need for a new station down the road. Thank you.
Thank you.
Rick, thanks. Is the fire department looking for cash or looking for funds to make that analysis, or will there be a proposal anytime soon?
We have currently have a study underway to look at the potential cost of renovating the High Street location. I hope that we bring to Prudential a recommendation that some money be set aside to do a comparative evaluation of the use of the school building, but that hasn't, I can only speak as one member of the committee. We have not reached any decision on that. I just would hate to see the opportunity for that comparison be lost, because I do believe personally that it could represent significant savings to the district.
Is there any kind of, I don't want to press, but is there any kind of timeline as to when the department as an institution, as opposed to individual members, would have a view as to whether they want to undertake that process? Because the Prudential Committee would be happy to listen to a proposal and to get funds appropriated for that. Or I'll leave it at that.
We have broached the topic at a number of meetings, but kept postponing it, waiting to find out if in fact we were ever going to get the title. But now that it's in hand, I would expect that this would be a matter of new business on our agenda next week, and would hope that we could bring a proposal to Prudential for that additional study.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Allison L has been raising her hand for a while.
Thank you, Allison Lowe, Old Kings Road. If the disposition of the property is to demolish the building, what body then decides the use of the property? So for example, if there's a camp of people who want a pickleball court and another camp of people who want a community garden and other various uses proposed, how does the use of the property, how does that proceed?
That will have
Thank
to
you.
go through the same procedure as just was described for deciding what to do with the building. It would have, that use would have to be presented to a district meeting for allowable uses on the property. And the ultimate, depending upon what the uses are, the ultimate cost to the district. I would say a pickleball court would require some insurance liability on our part, plus possible upkeep. And, I don't think that's, that's certainly not within our enabling legislation. And I think that's asking volunteers to, oversee active pickleball courts or other items that need, attention is a lot to ask.
Sure, no, I understand that, Fran, and I'm not advocating for that use necessarily. I was just curious as to what's the process for the use of the property to be approved? And I think you were able to answer that. So I thank you.
Great.
Yeah, it's a good question, because I've been thinking that, again, if you do decide to demolish it, then it's demolish it and do what with it? That is, let it go back to nature or have a pickleball court. I think that's why I thought that kind of the binary is, do we demolish it? Do we try to rehab it? And then from there, there's subsets of questions to answer.
We have another question from Jen Smith.
Hi, this is Jen Smith. I'm on Main Street. I volunteered at the Waldorf School for a year, so I spent a lot of time in that building. And one of the things that I thought would make an unbelievably great resource for the community is the section of the building. There's just one wing with a gym. It's the one with the commercial kitchen, which obviously now that we have the community center, we probably don't need that as much. But the gym is an enormously valuable resource. So I was wondering if there were any way to get another estimate on what it would cost just to preserve that part of the building. Again, and to Fran's point, yes, it absolutely would be another resource that the Cotuit Fire District was responsible for, but it's a village asset. We own it now. It seems like not the right thing to do to just destroy it if it can benefit the village going forward.
Well, that would just, besides playing basketball in there, I'm not sure what else anyone would want to do in there.
Large community meetings, large town meetings. It's bigger even than the community hall.
Yeah. But what else besides that?
Speaking of pickleball courts, one of the huge problems that I've been reading about throughout Cape Cod is people complaining about the noise of pickleball courts. An indoor pickleball court would avoid that problem.
Yeah, well, I think we'd have to have a vote on that. That's,
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, but that's my point. This is what that's what I'm interested in. I think the wrong thing to do is to just say, well, the fire district doesn't want any responsibility for any of this, and so, we really want to tear it down. I'd really like to know how we can get some of these things investigated and I mean, obviously I can't pay for an evaluation of what it would take, but is that something that we could do?
we could add it, to a request for a proposal to evaluate the building.
Okay, that would be great.
Yeah, presumably we can do some kind of update to the Habib report. I guess my only hesitation is we've got lots of ideas. Some of them are pretty good. You're not the first person to say, couldn't we just keep the gym? At some point, we need to kind of have a consensus that there's a large number of people, or at least a kind of a body of people who want to press it forward for any individual issue. But the short answer to your question is, do we think we maybe can find out how much it would cost to redo the gym? Yeah, I think we probably can.
Right, and if I could just talk for one more second, and that is, it's interesting that you say that there seems to be a consensus. I've heard people talk about it too, but I don't really get how you will take feedback from a large number of people in advance of, do you want villagers to email you with like things that they support? Because, there may be several hundred people who think that holding on to the gym is a good idea, but we can't find each other.
You know what, that's a great question. Every year at our general meeting, if we get 80 people there, that's a lot. So a lot of things get decided, they're open meetings and then they're publicized, et cetera, but we don't often get a lot of attendance. This seems to be the first issue where lots of people have opinions, and we're struggling a little bit with, how to, take that all in. That's why we, keep having these meetings and listen to what people are saying. I encourage everyone at this meeting to, whatever your view is, just tell us.
Okay. Is there, I don't know what your process is. This is probably right. The most galvanizing thing that you've had to communicate with the village about in a while is that, would there be any value to a mailing to allow villagers who aren't really checking your website for meeting dates? And you know what I mean? A lot of people aren't deeply engaged enough to really know what's going on, but would in fact have valuable ideas if they were tapped.
Yeah, we've talked about that. I believe we are going to do a card at some point. Pardon me. And we certainly try to give these meetings as much publicity as we can. The Cotuit Civic Association has been very good about using their email list to get out a word, and they've got sandwich boards and we've got sandwich boards kind of all over town. So we're doing our best, but I hear you. It's people want to get involved, and we're doing our best to make sure that people know about these meetings.
And I so appreciate it. Thank you so much. This is great.
So we have a question from Evan, who's muted.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm here. So a question I have is, you mentioned, and I read online about how legally you really would have to do some change of the law to have a community center or have some other type of structure. And it seems like that seems to be something that a lot of people in the community are interested in. So the first thing I would say is that it may be worthwhile getting that or trying to get that before making a decision, rather than saying, let's build a community center and now let's see if we can change whatever it is legally through the Mass legislature to allow us to do it. That's the one thing. The other thing is that I would tend to support having very limited structures on that land, because I think everybody who's been in Cotuit for a while realizes that all the land is being developed. There's virtually no place you can go and walk around. If a structure, if there was no structure on there, I'd be perfectly happy to have some open space. The other question I had was, does that mean that, with the legality behind it, does that mean that you couldn't have a passive structure up there, like a tennis court or a pickleball court? Because those courts are used basically 24/7. Having that kind of thing which wouldn't necessarily require, anyone to be there, would that also need more legal changes? And then the last thing I have, with the town apparently not allowing parking for the baseball games on Main Street, all the parking is around the school, and most of it falls within this area, and I assume that would be maintained. I'll keep quiet now.
I believe
with regard to the parking, we've had people from the Kettle Eaters on these calls. Although we've never heard anything kind of directly from them. Yes, we need that. That is certainly a possibility. Most of the parking occurs on the part of the property that's going to remain with the town, as I understand it. But, you know, the question of, again, this gets to the, assuming you do demolish it, do you keep any parking? Do you take away all the parking? You know, there's subsets of decisions to be made. Regarding the enabling legislation, I guess I have two thoughts. One is that people seem to think that this is an easy project. I don't think that it is, but it certainly isn't unless you're very specific about what you want to do. I guess my thought is, you know, I look at the numbers for rehabbing the building and I see, you know, $4.5 to $6 million. Do we have the stomach to do that? You know, it would have to be a very important need to do that. And that's my only thoughts about that. Fran, Seth?
Yeah, I'd like to say that the school property is a zone of contribution for our water. There's obviously a water tank right next to it. In terms of using that building, as far as we've been able to investigate and on advice from Mark Boudreau, the district attorney, you know, what we can do as a fire district, anything that we can do has to be related to either water or fire. And the other thing is that, you know, that however much it would cost to, you know, the Marston's Middle School, the cost to demolish it was $750,000, I believe, with a contingency fund of 250. I don't know how much of that was spent. But you would still have to, you know, if you just want to keep one part of the building, you would still have to spend that kind of money to demolish it because it, to get rid of it. And then you would have to do some construction work, remaining building. And then it will require us to, if we're allowed to do it, carry more insurance. And, you know, we would have ongoing maintenance and upkeep costs for the building. And I think when I think about this, I think about one, I know that we need an updated fire station. There's no question about that. So that's an expense the village is looking at, and that's going to be a shocking expense. And then everybody, you know, the town is busy putting in a sewer, and that's, you know, going to be expensive, and all that's going to, you know, raise people's taxes. So it's not just, there are multiple things going on that are going to affect the homeowners. And I just think people need to be aware of that. It's not just this one, you know, one project.
If I could just finish. So, you know, thanks for answering the questions. In the end, I would be in support of knocking that building down, putting nothing up, leaving the parking, because on a crowded day, that is certainly used. And I would, you know, I would pay twice to have the fire department built on High Street as opposed to using some of the very, very precious free space that's still in Cotuit to put up a firehouse, you know, and I may be in the minority, but, you know, the cost savings would have to be tremendous before I would give up the free space that we could potentially have. And, you know, because honestly, the High Street area is kind of worthless to most of the people in terms of recreation and so forth. Thanks.
We have a question from Patty Daly.
Thank you. First of all, Mark, I thank you very much for that presentation. I thought it was an excellent way to explain to people that this decision lies in the hands of the voters of the Cotuit Fire District. So with that said, I know that certainly costs are top of mind with this. And the Cotuit Community Center, Inc., which is a new nonprofit, would be looking to raise private funds to look into potential community center uses. So I just wanted to get that on the table. And then secondly, I think just in terms of next steps, perhaps once we have an RFP out and we understand better the costs of preserving the building or not, demolishing it, whatever that decision might be, I'm a planner, and we could have some planning meetings where we get people together in a room and lay out like options for uses and try and figure out what the Cotuit residents want to do or not do with that building. And I think that might be a really nice, good first step. In the alternative, we could do a survey or Google Forms, which is suggested in the chat too. So I think we can use in-person meetings and technology to try and get at the heart at what we all want to do or not with that land. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have
Any
a
other-
question, we have a question from ER Monday.
Oh, no, this is Carol Lyle. I don't know why it says that. It's what it's saying is Erg Monday, but that makes no sense at all. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Okay, all right. Thank you, Mark, for your presentation. It was very good. Fran, I agree with you completely on the expenses facing the town. And Mark, yes, we have, especially with this new huge church, let alone Freedom Hall, and other places, we have areas where all kinds of nonprofit classes, whatever, can take place. I appreciate wanting to keep the gym. There's the stage, but I still see unforeseen costs involved in just having the gym. And we have a pickleball court and a tennis court. I walk by there several times a week, and there are many times when it's completely empty. So unless there are neighbors nearby that are offended by the noise, I think, to my own knowledge, we're pretty well set. Now, as far as the firehouse goes, the thought of the town putting 3 houses on that land was abhorrent because of the water protection. So I have to wonder what kind of fire department can you have unless it was just office buildings. And then, yes, we need to look at the costs involved. And I'd be surprised, I just would be surprised if it weren't more efficient to make use of that land that we bought for the firehouse that's next door. And the firehouse, as we know from seeing those slides, really needs to be rebuilt. So as a citizen, I think, yes, the school, personally, I'd like to just tear it down. But to me, the firehouse is of utmost importance. And but as I say, I'm hopeful that they can make use of the land that we bought for them to have, which is next door, and they can rebuild it. But anyway, I think that's all I need to say. But thank you very much for all of your efforts. I do appreciate it. Thanks.
Carol.
Thank you.
We have a question from Chris R.
Chris, you muted.
Yep, just took me a second, sorry. I put it in chat because I thought I misunderstood something at the beginning. I thought that's what I was supposed to do. I'm just curious if the building, if it were determined that the building was demolished, we go back to nature, whatever, are there costs to us as a district owning the property for maintaining, even when things go back to nature, there are things that need to be maintained, i.e. if we leave that tarred driveway there, or if there's a liability factor that increases insurance for the town, whatever. I just don't know how that works, and I'm curious.
So,
I don't think so. I think it's just, excuse me, that's
go ahead.
the driveway is starting to have poles, hit potholes you can drive in and out of. And so, that obviously is a hazard. But the whole driveway, the part that's going to be on the town land and on our land is, needs to be repaired. But I think we could probably get rid of the semicircle drive so we can, get rid of some of that tar. And I can't see any, if we just let it go back to nature, we can let nature take care of itself.
With regard to the liability insurance, there actually is a Massachusetts statute that gives pretty broad immunity for injuries occurring on natural property that is kind of unimproved other than trails, for example. So there probably would be some costs, but they would be small. On the other hand, if we demolished it and wanted to, put in trees there, you could just let it go wild and whatever grew there. Or you might want to plant, native plants there and kind of help it along. So there's a potential for some cost there, but certainly dramatically lower than a rehab. Thank you.
That's helpful. The hazardous driveway or for walkers as well as vehicles at this point, I considered, that could be an option. Someone breaks their leg very easily or whatever. That's why I was asking. Thanks.
Thank you, Chris.
And
Jackie, do you want to read the letter from Mimi?
Sure.
People with their hands raised, Fran.
Well, sorry,
Right.
Carol.
we have Adam Zace who raised his hand.
Go ahead,
Hi,
Adam.
folks. Adam Zace here, one of your fire commissioners. I don't want to have the entire discussion here, but I urge for the folks who are asking questions about the fire department's needs, please come to our meeting on Tuesday, next Tuesday, the 14th at 5:30 at Freedom Hall. I also see that Ann Dooley very nicely put in the chat a comment that we have some pretty good information on the website in the form of a PowerPoint presentation, but I urge you to come to our meetings where we can really dig into these issues and these questions. And so thank you.
Thanks, Adam. Carol, Zace?
Just have a question about the roadway. Wasn't the deed held up because the town asked for a right of way to be maintained between Old Oyster and Main Street? Was that resolved? So don't we have to keep a roadway?
We do not have to keep a roadway. We objected to that. It was taking them forever. We barked at them and they eventually just sent the papers through in their original form. So the short answer is no, we don't.
Okay, thank you for the update.
Yep.
Jackie?
Yeah, and just following up on what Carol just asked. We call that a driveway. It's not a town road. It's just a roadway. It's not shown on the plan except for the plan that was created for this transaction. And so basically it could be abandoned, I believe, pretty much at any time. So I was actually asked by Mimi McConnell to read a letter into the record. So I would like to do that for her now. She says, here in Cotuit, we have the unusual opportunity to solve a current problem, the disposition of the long vacant elementary school, and how we can best find new ways to continue the service of the land on which it now stands. Here's a possibility. Let us consider placing the building itself out to bid to that phase of marketing that builders use in finding new uses for valuable wood and bricks and other materials. The income from such a source would allow us to tidy the space for village purposes, such as expanding the existing tennis courts, outdoor music, and other events,
places to walk safely, etc. Looking to the future, it could also become used to grow individual small gardens by villagers, as we see in small towns and cities today. The income might also cover the cost of raising the roof of the fire department to comply with current law. As an aside, let us not move the fire department to the school area. Finally, I propose that while we are in the mood and looking at how our world is changing rapidly with climate and related elements, that we establish a futures committee. This would include a cross-section of old and young people who see what is coming and want to care for this community and the larger world. With thanks to the Potential Committee, Mimi McConnell, 592 Santuit Road, Cotuit, Massachusetts. And she handed that to me this morning. So I just wanted to make sure it got read into the record for her. And then I just on my own behalf, I want to say that from the beginning, our goal was to protect the water supply. And I think first and foremost, that's what we need to keep in mind. And so whatever happens on the land has to be something that certainly protects the water supply. We, as the negotiating committee, made sure that the town kept the property that was recreational so that we would not have to do the annual maintenance on that, nor have the liability of that kind of active recreational uses. And so again, I just put that out there, but that was a decision that we made. And the town is responsible for the maintenance of the field and the baseball field, the field and the tennis courts. And then there's something else that I wanted to say, and that, well, there are all kinds of other little issues, but the bottom line is that there's a conservation restriction on the land that the town is holding on to, but we can do anything we want with the land where the elementary school is. But our primary purpose was to protect the water supply.
Absolutely.
I just want to publicly thank Jackie too. Jackie and Jim Danhauser were both on the negotiating committee with the town. They spent many hours in meetings with the town. I think her point about protecting the water supply is extremely well taken. And I had actually forgotten that initially the town wanted to give us the entire 13-acre property. And as she points out, we said, we don't want that liability. We don't want that maintenance cost for the tennis courts and the field. And that's why the property was divided the way it was. So it would be ironic if we were to take on those kinds of costs when we went to great lengths to make sure that we didn't have to take on those kinds of costs.
Yeah. Laura Opie? Laura?
You're on, hold on, unmuting. I'm sorry, I missed the first part of it with all the presentations. I hope I'm not repeating anything. There was no sound and I couldn't figure that out and I had to go somewhere else. I'm really concerned about a conversation around the cost to not only the local environment, but also, you know, what happens when you demolish a building and, you know, weighing that against making use of the building. And I think this is such a great opportunity to find out, well, what can you do with the building in a situation like this that actually is good for the water supply? What can we do as a community? And I know there are grants out there for these types of projects. And I just say, you know, if we can look at those ideas, because demolition is just hugely terrible for the environment. And, you know, the embedded costs of, you know, in that building and what it would take to build it somewhere else, or it's, you know, we don't even have good data on those things because it hasn't been something we've considered as a society. So, you know, there's almost responsibility there that goes for changing the way we think about demolition and thinking not only about out this property, but where is that going? Who's going to be burdened with the asbestos? Who's going to be burdened with the things that can't be reused, and what really can be reused? So I just like, the wider picture to be considered there.
Thank you. Just so you know, if we keep the building, the asbestos has to come out. It's not habitable with the asbestos in it the way it is now, so that would be a cost.
Fran, would you like to run through the chat that hasn't been covered with people raising their hands?
Yes,
Sure.
please.
So
Yes.
the first one that I believe we haven't already covered is Evelyn Young is saying, why can't we demolish the current building and have more time to decide what to build, if anything?
Well, that's apparently the $64,000 question, because we want some people to spend time to investigate what other uses can be made of the building. The fire commissioners a fire commissioner has suggested that, it would be wise to keep it so that we can, compare maybe using the cost of rehabbing that as opposed to what we're going to do on High Street. People are suggesting that, we study and go out for grants to, so that's, that's a lot for, a small committee to take a hold of. So I think that's, my view is I would personally like to see it demolished, let the grass grow and move on and protect our water. I think that's the most important thing that we need to do. But I don't know, Mark, do you have any thoughts, or Seth? Where is Seth?
I don't want to be repetitive. So I think I've expressed my views. Let other
Do we have
people talk.
Any further comments? Are there more
Yes, there
questions,
are.
comments? All right, I'll wait.
The next one is, please, Prudential Committee, please take the school property as one and the fire department building as two separate issues with separate needs for funds. Didn't the water commissioners specifically note that a fire station would be an inappropriate use of the school property because of the water use classification of the area?
I completely agree that these are two separate issues.
Yes.
My recollection was that the water department was hesitant about having the fire department building there, but they thought that there was kind of updated septic systems that might be appropriate. But I will defer to the record from the last meeting. And clearly, if there's no building there at all, you don't have to worry about a septic system. But as I say, I'll defer to the recording from the last meeting.
Another comment is Allison Lowe has asked who toured the expanded Federation Church and is familiar with the facilities available to the district and public as community space. A couple other comments came in after that that could be related. Volleyball, badminton, yoga, indoor soccer, volleyball. Oh, here's another about the church. The Federated Church has limited hours available. It is not a catch-all for the village. That's from Carol Zace. Conrad Geiser, yes, to lots of other sports in the gym. I would like access for my Frisbee group. We have used the gym for this for many years. Conrad's also suggesting to create a committee to work on this.
Well, I would just say, as the person that's currently responsible for the rentals of Freedom Hall, showing people the hall, talking to people in the hall, letting people into the hall, checking the hall to make sure there's been no damage, with whatever function's been held. Somebody's would also have to do that for this building. You just can't, hand out keys to everybody in town who wants to use it. And once again, we're back at the liability issue. You know, the reason that we didn't want the recreational fields or the tennis courts is because we didn't want to be responsible for the liability for anybody who got injured. So, and that's my comment on that.
There are more comments, but there's a hand raised. Scott Horsley, Water Commissioner.
Yes,
Hi,
thank you.
Scott.
And hello, thank you. I'll be really brief. I actually have to jump to another 7 o'clock meeting, but I also want to thank the Prudential Committee. I think this is a great way to proceed. The objective of getting comments, and it sounds like there are a lot of comments and a lot of interest, which is fantastic. I like the ideas that both Patty and I forget who else suggested, that in that it sounds like you reached out to find out if people are interested in alternative uses, and I've heard 12, 14, 15 people talk about alternative uses. So I would suggest the next one of the next steps should be a process, as I think Patty suggested, to try to further vet those ideas and look at the potential of considering them. And briefly on the water department, I know Mark Robinson is here too, can follow up after I jump to the other meeting, but we have some things on record. We did submit a letter to Mark Lynch and the Prudential Committee, which I believe is on their website. And the essence is, as everybody has said, we obviously our first interest is protecting the water, but we do believe that some of these uses that are being discussed certainly could be planned and operated at that site with no risk to the water supply, if in fact they're done correctly. So I just want to be clear about that. And again, unfortunately I need to jump, but I know Mark Robinson is here, and thanks everybody for the opportunity to hear these comments. They're great. Thank you.
Thanks, Scott.
There are quite a few other messages. One is, can the chat conversation be downloaded and preserved? And yes, that's part of the recording. So I will find a way to post that. Patty Daly also asked, after an RFP answers the question of general costs, we could have an in-person meeting to solicit input, or can we do a survey to see where interest is?
Yeah, sure. That's a great, we can do that.
Another related comment is Eric is asking if we could use the Civic Association email list to send a Google form that gives check boxes for the top 2 ideas they want. Obviously, we'd have to get it to everyone in the district, not just on a confined mailing list. Jim Danhauser says there are already tennis courts and pickleball courts that are on the land that the town will retain, and that will stay there and be available for use. Evelyn Young says, I think the rest of us need to understand what's wrong with the current firehouse. And Rick Stederman says, where is it documented that we need an expanded firehouse? Can the fire chief address this? I think the fire commissioners invited everyone to join the Tuesday night meeting.
And they have a presentation on the district website that shows exactly what's wrong with the.
And Anna Dooley is saying that there was a full presentation by the fire chief and commissioner at the August 23rd meeting at Freedom Hall. It's available in a Zoom recording. And Allison Lowe is saying Freedom Hall is very underutilized historically. Committee, does it make sense to form separate committees? Jessica Rapp is saying it was my understanding that the Prudential Committee asked for alternate to demolition proposal from the villagers months ago. Have there been any submitted in writing? Have there been any proposals submitting in writing?
No.
No, other than the original proposal, which is on the Prudential Committee website, indicating some possible uses. But other than that, no.
Mark Robinson, Water Commissioner, is saying we already do more than fire and water. We donate to the library every year. We must have amended the enabling legislation to do that. He's saying we voted to donate to the Historical Society last year. Fran, can you address that?
First of all, the library donation was added in 1950, at the same time that the district voted to spend money for the war memorials that you see around the village and also on the village green. And the money for the library at that point, that's when that happened, because at that time there was no money coming from the town to support the library. And there may not even been a state library commission, I'm not sure. And what was the second part?
Mark Robinson says we voted to donate
Oh, yeah.
to the Historical Society. Are we amending the Enabling Act to do that?
No, we aren't, because the proponents took that. The procedure is that you have a petition, you present it at an annual district meeting. It's voted upon. 80 people voted for that. It was given to our representative Kip Diggs, who took it up to the State House and was told that that wasn't a sufficient number of the population, a representative number of the population, to go further with looking at changing the enabling legislation. If it was sufficient to go forward, then it goes through the legislature at a snail's pace. And then it has to come back to another annual district meeting to be voted on by the district once it's come back from the legislature. So it's a good 2 to 3 year process to do that.
Let me throw in my 2 cents quickly on this too. The enabling legislation with regard to the Historical Society, for example, the Prudential Committee's view is that we are not in favor of that. I think largely related to the statistics about the number of visitors to the library versus the number of visitors to the Historical Society. Again, I'm a big fan of the Historical Society. If anyone has not been in there recently, I urge you to go. But pursuant to what Fran was saying, you would want to have a very high percentage of voters who are in favor of donating to the Historical Society every year before you decided to see if you could get the enabling legislation change to do that. My 2 cents.
This is Carol Zace. I have been helping the Historic Society. Kip Diggs has not, to my knowledge, taken anything to the state. He asked me to get numbers together as to how many people were at the meeting, but it was nothing he did at the state level. And we don't get more than 40, 50 people on average at our annual district meetings. So I'm continuing to work with him and educate him on the fact that that is our represented number, because that's who shows up and this is our form of governance. There's also some interest from the water commissioners to do an expansion of the enabling legislation. And then we're hearing tonight the possibility of people wanting to do that for the use at the Cotuit property. So there are 3 entities that would want to go forward like it was done in 1949, 1950 for the war memorials and libraries. So it can be done. We just have to get the state legislator to do his job.
Lisa, any more chats?
Mark Robinson has his hand raised, and there are more chats too.
Mark?
Thank you, Fran. It's a bigger point. It's not about the Historical Society, the library. They're all good causes. The point is that we were told in the August meeting by the district attorney that we couldn't amend the enabling legislation. And I stood up and I said that happens all the time. And we obviously are talking here about instances where it's already been done. It can be done again. I am agnostic about the building. I'm a water commissioner. I want to make sure that whatever happens there is not going to interfere with the purity of the water going into well number 3, which is less than 800 feet away from the school. But I don't like to be told that we can't do things because the legislation doesn't allow it. That's what legislatures are for, is to modify legislation as time goes on and needs evolve and the will of the people come forward. And I think it was very detrimental to be told at the meeting last time that we couldn't do this. We can do this. And that's my point. It's not about the Historical Society. Thank you.
I will repeat what he learned was anything that we do with that building needs to be related somehow to the functions of the fire district, which would be, fire or water. That, as he understands it in the research that he has done, and in some of the research that I've done, I looked at all the fire districts in the state to see, what they do, and there are some very lucky ones in the western part of the state who people have left entire forest land, which they've been able to sell to environmental groups and earn money that way for their fire district. But we obviously don't have that ability. So
There are a few chats related to the legislation associated with fire and water, and some of them are associated with, well, where does Freedom Hall fit in that? Freedom Hall is where the fire and water commissioners meet and the Prudential Committee meets to deal with the district. And Allison Lowe also says it's a district-owned property and there's an obligation to maintain it. The library contribution is a warrant article every year.
Right.
Mark Robinson, who just spoke, I think he just said what he already chatted, and then Carol Zase has also chatted, spoken. We have 5 new messages left. Dake Henderson, returning some land to open space might also have costs. If the area is left to return to nature, it is highly likely that non-native invasive species would predominate and the area would be inaccessible to walkers as well as rather useless for wildlife. Some planning and planting would be in order. Mark Robinson's response was, the point is that yes, our original enabling legislation was limited to fire and water, but it is disingenuous to say, oh, I'm repeating what he just raised his hand to do. And then I think, okay, one comment that doesn't seem to have arisen before is from Lori Opie. One use additional that might be considered for the building is a sail loft without washing capabilities. Sewing canvas and sails is a much needed business with very low environmental impact. There is great need on Cape Cod for more sail and canvas workers, and an educational aspect would be included. That completes the chats.
okay, thank you. Is there anyone who wants to comment? Laura Opie? Laura? Can't hear you. You're muted.
It wouldn't unmute. I had another chat in there that I guess you thought was a repeat, but it actually wasn't. I had just said, in terms of liability and responsibility, can't that be effectively transferred to a nonprofit that manages the property with waivers, contracts, and agreements? I mean, you don't have to have the responsibility fall on the existing structure. It can be a new structure that manages the property.
Yeah, I'm not.
It can be a new organization that manages the property. There's no reason you couldn't have another organization managing the property the same way the Cotuit Library is managed by a different organization, and the Historical Society. Things crop up and gain interest. It's, at one point the parade, the parade in Cotuit for 4th of July was a very small event, and it gathered momentum, and now it's a huge thing that's supported by various other, fire department and others. There's room for growth.
Well, I think that's something, we would need legal I would need some legal information on because, are we still gonna be responsible for the maintenance, upkeep, and the insurance of the building if, and if some nonprofit takes it over, are they going to do everything that's necessary to make it usable?
That
Which
would-
at the moment it's not usable.
That would be the intent. That would be the idea to
That
have
would
it.
be millions of dollars.
Well, it would be billions of dollars if you have it quoted by, people who charge billions of dollars to do it. But I think there's a lot that could be done on a volunteer basis by people who know how to do these things and would like to see it done. A roof you said last time was $1 million, but there are a lot of different kinds of roofs and there are a lot of people who could do it. And if you can separate the liability, and I think we need to all learn to separate that liability issue from the reality of what can happen, because we're all hampered by fear of liability. And we should, there's something wrong with the government when you're afraid to do something because of the liability, when there are people who are willing to do it for low cost or free, volunteer. The government shouldn't hamper us from coming together and doing things that really aren't dangerous.
Okay.
Jen Nash has chatted a great question. What are the next steps after tonight's meeting?
I'd say our next meeting is, the Prudential Committee's next meeting is November 27th.
Raise my hand.
So we'll be, discussing tonight's meeting and, deciding, what, how we want to move forward. Beth?
You want your hand raised?
Yeah.
Mark? Okay.
I think there's someone else.
Yes, Lee Weil on Dewey Lane, real close to the school. And based on the map that was shown, it seems to me that when you first come off Main Street into the school property on the right-hand side, is that private property to the right of the entrance where the tennis courts are?
No, it's not private property, that's town property, but only, I would say, about 20 feet from the road, perpendicular to the road. And then after that, it's private property.
Okay, because I'm just thinking of the parking for the ball games. And my other question is, I was walking there and there was a gentleman that was doing archery in the woods. And again, you're talking a lot about liability, and it struck me before the town transferred the deed over to CFD, what our liability would be for something like that. I mean, you can call the police, but yeah, people are using the property there for whatever they want right now. And archery kind of struck me as a big liability.
Yeah, if he doesn't have a target, that is a problem.
No, he had a target set up too.
Oh, did he?
Yeah, so I'm just saying, things are going on there, and I think we need to think about, moving forward, how people are choosing to use that property as however they want.
Yeah.
That's
Thank you.
all.
That's an excellent comment. I would probably call the town about that. I assume he was in the field.
He was in the woods
Oh, okay.
near the basketball hoop.
Oh, okay. All right.
And there are a lot of people that use that area for, their dogs, and I
Right.
walk through there all the time. And it was a little unsettling.
I'm sure.
Yes, that's a terrible idea.
Right.
Fran, a couple
Thank
of
you.
more comments came in. I don't know where you want to cut
Sure,
this
go
off.
You want to be unmuted?
Allison Lowe says, why not just sell the property to this nonprofit and get the district out of it?
We have no indication that the nonprofit has the funds to purchase. But also, well,
I don't think
we would need to know what the nonprofit's intention was. It's not like this property is ours, you know. We did this intergovernmental transfer so we could have control over the property. Just giving up control over the property would kind of negate all our efforts to this point.
And
I thought
Lori,
I thought that was part of the agreement that we couldn't sell it, no?
It is, geez, I'm not going to remember now. I think it's in the conservation restriction. If it is not explicitly called out, it is certainly implicitly called out.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Lori Opie has added a chat that asks what the status is of the 200,000 set aside for research.
It's still presently set aside. You know, we've had to start using some of the money, obviously, to insure the building. And, you know, we're going to have at least an electric bill associated with it and an alarm bill. But, you know, I mean, this just happened, like the deed just got registered at the county yesterday. So we haven't had much time to discuss those fine points.
And Adam Zace has raised his hand and he's unmuted.
Thanks. Hey, my observation of this is that there seems like there's an awful lot of thoughts around how can the citizens of the district get the Prudential Committee more input and so forth, to classify that, to codify, to really begin to study the input. And my concern is, and to Jen Nash's point about next steps, my concern is that the cadence of meetings, of monthly, I'm concerned that we continue to lose some momentum around the gathering of input. And I was wondering if there isn't a way for you guys to set up some more special committees that has been suggested. It seems like there needs to be more forum opportunity to properly gather the information around which the monthly Prudential Committee meetings can then process and discuss and begin to make decisions around. I'm just very concerned about losing the momentum. Thank you.
I don't think
Now-
we're losing any momentum.
I have some comments, just questions. So now after our last meeting, which was more well attended than this one, even the in-person meeting, which did go a little bit far afield, but had a lot of commentary and a lot of input. Mark, after that, we established the website with the direct contact to you, and you were assigned the clerk of the works position to maintain the feedback from the village or any, a dialogue, this project or what it could be. And what did you receive ultimately after that?
I received, it's either 3 or 4 emails that I responded to with various different opinions, but it was underwhelming.
Right. And I guess that's part of my point. After we've had now 3 district meetings, right, where this issue has appeared, and a couple dozen regularly scheduled hosted Prudential Committee meetings, and now 2 of these meetings, I just wonder, we as a committee have sort of, based on your presentation earlier, we sort of have an idea of what we are leaning towards based on our assessment of the situation and what we feel is prudent, financially prudent for the district at this point. And so we kind of tried to, in the last few meetings that we had, we were talking about putting it back onto the community in a way, what their suggestions would be, as Jessica mentioned. And, we haven't really received any kind of concrete, anything cohesive in the months intervening between this period. And I just wonder, I mean, since we sort of have our stated position, where will we go next with having no real solid response to any of these topics, anything really materialize?
Conrad Gauser is asking to repost the email address for sending input.
Lisa, does my Cotuit Fire District .org automatically forward to my personal email?
Well, that's the way you were supposed to set it up. We were with Secure Networks. That is, your email address is mlynch@cotuitfiredistrict.org, but let me check with Secure Networks to make sure that's coming to your other inbox.
Great. So the answer to that question is Lisa's going to make sure that that happens, and the email address that you can send it to again is Lisa is what?
mlynch@cotuitfiredistrict.org.
Thanks. I just think that that'll be better for me.
I'm going to spell that out. MLYNCH @cotuitfiredistrict.org.
Thanks. They should probably go there just for better filing purposes.
Could I make a suggestion?
You want to raise your hand.
Oh, sorry, I gotta raise my hand. Sorry, this is new to me, but I would suggest putting something like this out that gets into people's mailboxes and so forth, rather than expecting people to go to the website. If you really want to reach out, that's just my suggestion. Thank you.
Okay.
And as a corollary to what I said before, I'll just get this out real quick. So we will act as instructed through the binding, the warrants that are presented at the district meeting and the will of the voters in terms of this is what I meant to say at the end of what I just said, but it slipped my mind entirely. But so that, I think we might be couching it a little bit incorrectly if we are saying that you should bring it all to us and that we should then be the arbiter of what the plan would be that is an alternative to what we've kind of not decided upon, but are leaning towards, because we will do what is brought, we will have to execute what is brought before us and passed at a district meeting or a special district meeting in the form of a warrant. But I think that it may be us pursuing it and continuing these meetings, which we do have posted meetings every single month. And we could have more of these meetings theoretically, but now that we've taken possession of the building, it's going to continue to be a financial burden that's going to increase over time, the maintenance, the continued maintenance of this building, the longer that we draw this process out. Sorry, I just wanted to finish what I started before.
I just wanted to say that all of our email addresses are on our website. And Conrad, we can't do any walkthroughs of the school because it's not, we were not allowed to go in there for our annual district meeting because of the health department. It's been sitting empty for too long, and it's just, the air is bad, and so we can't do any walkthrough.
Fran, can we check with Chief Brown? I thought that the reason that the town, frankly, I think the reason the town didn't want to do it is because they just wanted to wash their hands of this. They didn't want to get involved. They didn't want to have any possibility of liability. They just said, no, we can't do it. So I thought that their main reasoning was something relating to the fire escapes. That is the doors. Can we talk to can I talk to Sean Brown, Chief Brown, and see what his view is on this? It did occur to me that there are people who continue to insist that it's in good shape. It is not. And it might, a picture is worth 1,000 words. It might help people a lot in this process to see what it looks like right now.
Well, I'm just saying that, it could be the reason the town gave me when I was trying to arrange this was that it was a health hazard. And they weren't gonna let us go in there because it was a health hazard.
All right.
Just go back to the response to Mark Lynch, you know, speaking from kind of a personal perception of what's going on. I didn't send anything to Mark Lynch because there's perception to me that there's sort of a, I don't want to say anti-community center, but that, you know, you guys are kind of being really practical and not wanting to, whatever. I don't want to try to label what you're doing, but I responded instead, looked up for the community center and talked to them. And I think they had a pretty good response. And I think that's because there was perception that there was interest in at least a discovery, you know, like, let's find out what we can do. Let's see what's possible. Let's see what funding is out there. So I think that to take what was to the response to Mark Lynch doesn't really represent what types of responses there were to the, you know, to the project.
Well, I would say we heard about that proposal. The community.
You know, at it would have been nice if you had also posted, since you mentioned that group came forward, their contact information on the Prudential you know, website, because I had to go through quite a bit to figure out how to contact them. So
the only thing we have in writing from them is that one letter that got sent around. That's it. We have no other information. They have a website which doesn't give any contact information. You know, we haven't heard from them since you know, they spoke at the last meeting. And you know, when they spoke at the last meeting and when they sent that letter around over a year ago, that's, you know, nobody has come to us from that group, come to the Prudential Committee. And so, you know, the last I heard was they were waiting to hear from their lawyers.
right, I've been working with them some, you know, so I represent them in a way because, you know, I'm trying to work with them with some of the things I'm doing, and you know, I can just say everyone's overburdened these days, but we just, you know, we want to be able to have the line of communication and a little support in looking into alternatives and looking into possibilities that are way too much for you guys to consider. You know, we know your plates are full and you're doing a lot, but we'd like to do that.
Thank you. Any other?
Fran, there's a comment from Mike Curtis. Thank you, Mark, Fran, and Seth. You've done a great job and we appreciate all that you do.
Thank you. It's very nice.
Thank you. I see Jessica has a comment.
Her comment is, my recommendation is for the Prudential Committee to draft a warrant article to demolish and call a special meeting to bring it to a vote.
Are there any other comments or questions?
I do not see any.
There's one from Dave Johnson that I see posted.
Whoop. I missed that one. Thank you. To the points made by the last few commenters, to provide the Prudential Committee with direction, I suggest a townwide mailing that summarizes the options, provides web addresses for additional information on a firm date for feedback to the Prudential Committee so they can move the process forward based on the consensus of opinions provided up until the selected date. The Civic Association does a very good job of communicating via newsletter through US mail, and I think the Prudential Committee would benefit from the same.
Okay. So if there are no other comments or concerns or questions?
I don't see one.
Okay. I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you for all the
Thank you, everyone,
participants
very
on
much.
this call. We greatly appreciate it.
Yes, thank you.